But it was that experience of being CMO there that woke her up to what was next for her, to become a chief soul officer, and to help liberate souls. And that's why she is here with us today, to liberate our souls. She is our preacher. She's not selling any snake oil, but she's going to tell us a little bit about what it means to actually move from being the CMO of one of the best known brands in the world to actually choosing to be a chief soul officer and help people to understand that a Soulbbatical is actually something we should be doing in midlife and beyond. So, Shelley, welcome.
Thank you. Cheers, guys.
Yeah, cheers.
I do have the spiked stuff. I got a little Spanish Albarino here.
Oh, I love that. Oh my God.
See, again, always.
I know. That's my favorite kind of wine. So.
Okay, great. Have some waiting for me when I get to the Baja.
Okay. And Shelley is coming as a student at the Modern Elder Academy in November. So, hey.
Can't wait.
Crossing the fingers that, planes and all will still be coming. So tell us your story. I mean, just the brief version of how you went from being the CMO of Harley Davidson to realizing that you had a soul purpose that was speaking to you.
Yeah. So why don't I tell kind of my awakening story? Because I know, Chip, I remember the very first time you and I spoke, I told you this story, and we were like, had the tears and the chills all happening. So just to give everybody a short background, I mean, I'm 50 years old. I spent 26 years in corporate America. I worked across some incredible brands, Harley Davidson being the one where I spent kind of the last portion of my corporate career. So 6.5 years at Harley. It was incredible, riding motorcycles like a badass around the world, getting to meet all these incredible customers who are tattooed with the brand. And yet, and I'm curious if some of you can relate to this, I was living this super sexy life on the outside, and yet I was feeling this kind of emptiness and this longing on the inside. And that was the beginning of me kind of like pushing it down and numbing and saying, yeah, but I've got all this stuff. I've got this title and I've got these brands and I've got this paycheck. I've got all the things. And the universe, your soul kind of whispers to you, and then it shouts, and then it like grabs a 2x4 and like whacks you, in the solar plexus, and is like, you got to pay attention. And the moment for me where it was like, you've got to pay attention, was a nightmare that started haunting me. And it's actually where I start the book. And the nightmare was me every single night. This is me at 45 years old. This is 5 years ago that this started happening. Me at 45 years old being ripped out of my sleep because I was seeing the same thing night after night. I was basically being lured through a place that kind of looked like my apartment into this dark hallway that I'd never seen, and then this very dark room that I'd never seen. And I enter this dark room and it's like nothing. There's no life. It's chills. There's no windows. There's no decor. There's no nothing. And yet this force is pulling me through. And I look up, and on the other side of the room, I just see this tiny outline of a utility closet, like a flickering light behind it. And that same force pulls me to that utility closet, and I open the door. And every single time I open the door, I look down and I see my dog. This is my same dog that had passed away 6 years prior to me having this nightmare. My dog is alive, basically malnourished, neglected, dying on the floor, whimpering for my attention, longing for love and attention. And I wake up. Every time I wake up soaking wet, sobbing, crying, and wondering, like, what's reality? Like, was that the reality? Like, is my dog actually alive and I'm the monster who's forgotten about him and neglected him for 6 freaking years? Or what is going on? And long story short, I was so tortured. I wasn't sleeping. It was impacting everything in my life. And I finally went to a doctor, an integrative medicine doctor, and he prescribed meditation as one piece of my journey. And it was the very first time I got into meditation. I didn't have that practice before.
So when it comes to this whole soul thing is a new thing for you. You didn't grow up in like Venice Beach or Boulder or Mill Valley.
I grew up in the western suburbs of Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's about as far, about as far from what I knew and I was raised with. So 100%, this was, what is this stuff? And even meditation, of course I was aware of meditation, but it wasn't part of my life and it wasn't a practice, but I knew that I was being called to understand something. And through that meditation, I started to see what is so obvious to me now, that what I was seeing in that nightmare was actually, my dog was a proxy for my soul. And my soul was so malnourished and longing for love and attention and nourishment and acknowledgement. And that was kind of the beginning of me going, I'm really disconnected from myself. And even more so, I'm living someone else's dream. I'm living my dad's dream. And that was just sort of like, that was the slap I needed to start paving my way to investing in the possibility of my future self and really, really getting clear on who I am and what I want and the impact I want to have in the world.
Wow. How long did this dream go on for?
A year. Honestly, David, the dream didn't. So from the point I figured it out to the point I walked out of Harley, and I wanted to walk out of Harley in a way where I was respecting the people I loved, the brand I loved, a company that had taken very good care of me. And so I wanted to make sure, so it took me about 6 months to pave the way for my own exit, putting a successor in place. But that nightmare didn't end until the night of the day that I walked out of that company.
And then it was over.
And then it was over. It was my soul screaming at me to say, you've got to take the first step.
What was it about the job?
It actually wasn't about the job at all. I mean, that's the funny thing is that, okay, let's be honest, right? I mean, there are some things in corporate America that can be quite toxic. Not everything was perfect. Harley, like most companies, is not a perfect company. There were many things that I wanted to change. I was trying to change. But in reality, this wasn't about Harley at all. This was about one woman's journey of being completely and totally out of alignment with her own truth.
Wow, you are so tough that you went through that for a year. I mean,
yeah,
while also being the CMO of a huge company, trying to hold it together.
Wow.
Well, here's the thing, you guys, and this is why I do the work that I do, because I'm really passionate that we need to speak up about this stuff. And we need to know that, I wrote the book in a really raw and vulnerable way. The book is a roller coaster ride of the light and the dark. And I wanted people to see it that way because I think it's really easy to say, oh, you were the chief marketing officer of Harley and that's so sexy, and kind of put you on a pedestal and think that you've got everything. And I wanted people to see my insides and the journey and the turmoil, because I want more of us to be able to talk about that. And in my book, and I know we'll get to this later, tied to the charity that I support is my own mental health journey around depression, around attempted suicide, and then going through this and trying to pretend everything was okay. And now I don't live in a world where I try to pretend everything's okay. I live in a world where I know vulnerability is strength and that it's okay to ask for help.
Wow. Tell us just a little bit more about the book, maybe, and then I want to explore a little more on Harley. But just tell it. I mean,
the good stuff.
Yeah, the good. Yeah.
So the book is, Chip, I remember you and I having this conversation on my podcast. So when I wrote this book, so I've already said, like, I was really clear. Well, where should I start? So this book came to me. Let me start with that because it was a really interesting journey. This book came to me, and I believe it's because of how I'm showing up and in my philosophy that every badass accomplishment is a series of tiny steps. All we ever have to do is take that next tiny step.
That is David believes in that down to his toes.
Yes. Another thing we've got in common. I love it, right? And I think if you try to think further out ahead, first of all, we're not in control of any of it. And second of all, the universe isn't going to present these opportunities and open doors and portals until we take that tiny step. And so from the second I took the tiny step, over the threshold outside of Harley to where I am today, almost 4 years later, has been a series of those steps and showing up, believing in and understanding my purpose, which, by the way, I had no idea of when I walked out the door. When I walked out the door of Harley, I was like, all I know is that I need to reconnect with myself. I need to nurture my soul, and I'm going to follow my passions, and I'm going to give myself 12 months and see where it leads. And then through all of that, through my dad's strokes, all this stuff I write about in the book, I realized that I was kind of at the tip of the spear of a movement that needed to happen, of more of us living more authentically, more courageously, and more purposefully. And that authenticity is the truest form of rebellion.
So quick question for you.
Yeah.
And then I want to give David opportunity to ask more Harley questions. So this guy, Carl Jung, the psychologist, said something to the effect that the first half of your life, your primary operating system is your ego. In the second half of your life, your primary operating system is your soul. What would you say to that? What do you think about that, Shelley, given that now that you're a chief soul officer?
For me, it's 100% true. 100% true. I actually wish I would have said that. But he was way smarter than me.
Well,
way smarter than me. I've got some Shelleyisms in the book, but they're not quite that good. But you know what? I think it is. And honestly, so this plays into the thing that you and I were talking about. When I started writing this book, so I got invited to tell my story. And I said, you know what? I don't just want to tell my story. I don't just want this to be pure memoir. I want this to be part memoir, part manifesto to get this movement going, because I don't want me to be the only chief soul officer. I want us all to be chief soul officers. I want us all to be living our truth and rebelling for what matters most to us. And so when I thought about it, a way to describe it, I thought, I want the reader to feel like I'm sitting next to them on the couch with my arm around them saying, I got you. Mm. And I remember we were talking about MEA, about Modern Elder Academy, and you said, oh my God, that's right. Like for us, it's we got you.
Yeah.
And I think more and more, especially as we're helping people ease into the second half, honestly, Soulbbatical, just like anything else, can apply, at any point in your life. It's really about living your truth. It tends to happen around midlife. And I didn't feel like I had any support system. When I walked out of Harley, I was simultaneously like emboldened and terrified. Some days I would be like, fuck yes, I did it. And other days I'd be like, what the fuck have I done? And I'd be like in the fetal position on my kitchen floor, right? And I vacillated between those two things. And so I said, I want to be that person for people that says, I've been there, I've done that, and you can do it too. And your way is going to look different than mine, but here's like a rough guide to help you on this journey. And that's the way I wrote the book.
Mm.
Chip, we talk a lot about Frankl. And logotherapy, right? So I remember reading something about him. He was a practicing psychiatrist in, I think, Vienna, maybe Berlin.
Vienna. Yep.
In the 60s, he used to, his therapy was very quick, and somebody would come to him and be very disturbed, and he would just say, "Why didn't you kill yourself today?" And they would pause, and that question would elicit what their mission in life was, like what their logo was. And I think that idea of mission, that like, what is purpose, right? That's what I get from your story, is that, not that you're going to kill yourself, but
well, I tried, but that was years earlier.
You can only say that, if you're somebody like Frankl, you can ask that question. I'm not.
Totally.
So I can't ask that question. But that idea of finding, your ikigai, like what's the thing where all the bits come together that fulfills me in my mission for life? I think it's very powerful.
So just to be clear what David said, because I love this, when he's an ikigai, it sounds like a terrible person, a terrible man.
Oh.
An ikigai. So it's spelled I-K-I-G-A-I. Google it, and we're not going to talk about it anymore. But ikigai.
I love it.
It is
really
it is the opposite of an ikigai. So
can I just comment on that, on the purpose thing real quick? So David, I love that you brought that up, because I talk in the book about purpose, because I think purpose is also, while it can help guide us and it becomes our GPS system, it's also really lofty and overwhelming and intimidating when people hear that word. I know I felt that way when I left. If you had asked me what my purpose was, I would have been like, I got enough on my mind, like, leave me alone. So I wrote about it and I asked myself some questions about it, and I realized the only reason I found this purpose was kind of following the breadcrumbs of my passions. Because I think so often purpose is something that like we try to intellectualize, where purpose is really the story in our soul.
Yeah, it's action.
Yeah.
That's, but anyway, I want to talk more about action as in bikes.
As in motorcycles? Nice segue.
What's more action than a motorcycle, right? So did you ride? I'm guessing like being part of Harley, like you had to ride, right? If you didn't ride before, you got to ride when you're there.
Yeah, I mean, they don't force you to, but I especially felt like, listen, I'm in marketing. We're getting into the minds of our consumers. If I'm not on a motorcycle and understanding how this all works and participating in those events and hanging with those men and women, I'm not doing my job. But I'll be honest, I didn't ride before I went to Harley. I was hired for all of the other global marketing experience that I had and for my fresh perspective from outside of the category, which was brilliant and also super intimidating, because then you walk in and these people have ridden their whole lives. I didn't grow up. Okay. So it's sort of like this Midwestern upbringing, but nobody in my family rode a motorcycle. wasn't even raised around motorcycles, but it was the perfect time in my life. So talk about a midlife transition. I had just come out of an epic, messy divorce. I get recruited to go to Harley, and it all fit together. And I was like, yes, badass rebel soul Shelley Paxton is back. Like, she is throwing a leg over the iron horse, rolling on the throttle and going. And so I committed. I was all in.
So what Sportster, Bagger, what was your ride?
I had a Softail Slim.
Ooh, sexy.
It was sexy. It was charcoal
Nice.
gray with white seats, white grips. It was very sexy. I did sell it after I left. I was kind of slimming my life down, and but that was a hard moment to give that girl up.
Yes.
It was very sexy.
It's like that. It's a way of life. Like we were talking earlier. Like that's, people tattoo that brand on their arm. It's like nobody else. Who puts Coca-Cola on their arm? Like,
no, I know exactly. Well, how relevant, given that you guys were talking to Jonathan or 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So funny enough, I met Jonathan years ago in Macau at a McDonald's conference when he and I were both presenting, because McDonald's was my client and Coca-Cola and McDonald's have always been a tight partnership. Funny. I mean, these are like small worlds converging. I was going to say something. Oh, so the thing about iconic brands, and I want to share this because this is an epiphany that I've had, and then I promise we can get into motorcycle stories if you want to dig deeper, David.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about brands that I've thought a lot about. When I walked away from Harley, I was like, you know what? I was trying to figure out what was my worth and my value, because for so many years in my adult life, I had attached all of my value to huge brands, McDonald's, Visa, AOL, Harley Davidson, the list goes on. And I was like, I'm nothing. Like, what's my value? Is anybody even going to call me anymore? And then I finally had, and by the way, a lot of people didn't. And I realized that that's the way the world works. And I had to turn inward and say, no, actually, what if the question is, what if the Shelley Paxton brand is the most iconic brand you could ever represent? And that shifted my entire perspective.
Let's go there. I'm going to actually jump in for a second, David. So Soulbbatical suggests a sabbatical for the soul, but maybe it's a sabbatical for the brand of who you are and are meant to be.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Ooh, that's good.
Talk about just the idea of taking space. Now, let's recognize it's a privilege to take space, because if you are living paycheck to paycheck, you don't have the money to do this.
Yeah.
But just talk about forget about Soulbbatical. Talk about sabbatical. Talk about gap year. Talk about what is the value in taking a break from your habits and your default world life and saying, I am now without identity. I am without all of the stuff that sort of I used as my armor for who I am. What did that feel like? And what are 3 pieces of advice or tips you could offer our listeners or those who are watching you right now around the subject of creating space for yourself and seeing what emerges?
So many things are coming up right now. So I think it's invaluable, and I think we can do it without leaving our jobs. So what the epiphany I had is that Soulbbatical isn't, or sabbatical, I wanted it to be Soulbbatical because I wanted it to be a deeper exploration and a nourishing of my soul, and which is why I created that word. But I honestly don't believe it means leaving your job. I believe it means finding yourself. And so that, to me, is where the whole idea of Soulbbatical is anchored. And while my journey, my very personal journey, started with leaving my job, I realized as I was going through and going on this journey that, this is about the deep inner work. This wasn't that I had to leave Harley. I believe I personally did have to leave Harley because I was meant to be on this journey that I'm on right now. And one of the hardest things, and so this would probably be thing number 1, one of the hardest things for me was slowing down. I realized I had an addiction to busyness. And in the book, I say busyness is a bitch of an addiction because we wear it as a badge of honor. And that was the first thing for me. It was learning how to be okay being. And the second part was learning how to be still and really sink into that deep listening and explore layers deeper than I had in my initial meditation to really understand, like, what's coming up? What are my values? What are my commitments to myself? What is my getting clear or reminding myself of my worth? Doing all of that inner work, looking inside versus outside.
But Shelley, if you do that, your emotions catch up with you. You've been outrunning your emotions your whole fucking life, and now they catch up. You slow down, and they're like, "Oh, how was that?"
Then you have a breakdown in a cottage in New Zealand, which is exactly what happened to me. By the way, I saw a bunch of people in the chat earlier on when you asked the question about the 110,000. I saw a bunch of New Zealand. So all of you who said New Zealand, I'm with you 1,000%. That is exactly where I would spend my money too. I spent 2 months of my Soulbbatical in New Zealand. And Chip, that's exactly what happened. And what's really interesting, and this sort of prepared me for quarantine as well, So I get to New Zealand, I spend a few weeks with a friend kind of doing the fun stuff. And then she goes back to the States and I'm like, nope, this is my spirit land. This is where I'm meant to do the work. And I find this, I'm looking for this idyllic little cottage where I'm right across the street from the water so I can start writing. And I finally find this cottage. I'm beyond excited. And this is going to be a completely just solo shut out the outside world. I found this beautiful place on Maori land, right across, literally steps across from the water. And I'm about to settle in to do all of this work. And the universe was like, oh yeah, you are, because the universe delivered an epic monsoon like New Zealand had never seen. I was back on the North Island at this point, up in the Bay of Islands, if anybody knows that area, about 4 hours north of Auckland. And so, I mean, sideways rain, trees tipping over. You couldn't be outside. You couldn't do anything. I'm alone in this foreign land, in this place I literally moved into hours earlier. And I was like, oh, I get it. I can't run anymore. And that's exactly what happened. It was exactly as you just described. I was trying so hard. I was like hiking every day and doing this thing and doing that thing. And the universe was like, no, you're not. You're going to sit your ass in this little cottage and you're going to scream and you're going to cry and you're going to swear and you're going to journal and you're going to write and you're going to get it all out of you. And you're going to start to come to terms with what's going on. And that was a pivot point for me. And in fact, by the time I left New Zealand, probably 6 weeks after that point, I went to this very famous point called Cape Ranga, and I bid adieu to corporate Shelley. By that point, I'd done this kind of identity work where I was like, I'm ready to say goodbye to corporate Shelley, and I'm ready to welcome in soulful Shelley. And when I leave this point and I fly back home, that's who I am for the rest of my life. And that's what I did. But that was hard fucking work. You're exactly right. I had to sit with it because you have to sit in that pain.
It's a rite of passage.
I think, you know, somebody, I had a mental health professional tell me once that we all carry 3 fundamental delusions about ourselves, that there are like 3 things about ourselves that we just cannot get straight. And for me, what I found.
Wait, what are those 3?
Well, they change, right?
Oh, okay.
Probably. but the thing
I want to know my delusions. Come on.
Well, that's the thing. Like the thing about they're so powerful that like even if somebody tells them to you, you're going to say that's not true because they're very powerfully held. And in my experience, what I found is that the things that I dislike most, or I think are most impossible for me, are actually the things that I'm best at. But it's taken me decades and decades and decades to sort of, you know, get clear on that. And it's like, I agree with you. I don't think people have to leave their jobs or, you know, do these other things. It's more, I love what Chip said about changing the identity of brand Shelley. Like, and it's this idea of like, what is my value in life? What is my best and highest use? And chances are, whatever I'm thinking, I'm wrong. And I need like people outside of me to come in and say like, well, actually, maybe not. Maybe it's this other thing. So anyway, I really identified what you said.
Well,
yeah.
Shelley, I mean, first of all, let me just say before Shelley answers that, if you have questions, this is a great time to put them in the chat because Laura will start keeping a track of them. And I know there's already one question that's come in. How do you do this if you have kids? That's a good question for us to sort of ponder, is like, etc. But ask questions in the chat. Laura's going to go ahead and start to filter through those. And then in a moment, she'll ask Shelley some questions. But Shelley, any thoughts on what David said? Or
you know
just
what?
in general, as just so it's maybe a recap thought before we go into questions.
Well, so here's what I was thinking. I actually just flipped to the opening of my book and I wondered, somewhat in response, David, to your question and just this conversation overall, the first like 3 or 4 paragraphs introduce like my idea of Soulbbatical and what I was really going for. And I thought, I wonder if it would be valuable to read it to the group, because it's really how I sum up what I meant when I put soul and sabbatical together and the journey I went on. Is that good?
Let's do it.
I'll do that, and that'll carry us into Q&A time. So a quick little story. This is only a couple minutes, you guys. So, Soulbbatical may be a made-up word, but I promise you, it's a very real experience. It has the power to transform your life, just as it did mine. But you can't write a book with a made-up title without explaining why you made it up, right? So here goes. Initially, I mashed together the words soul and sabbatical to describe my desire to stray from a traditional career path and blaze new trails toward understanding myself and my bigger purpose in the world. I wanted a handle that signified the depth and importance of my decision, something that screamed, this is different. This is not a conventional sabbatical. It's an internal exploration of self and potential. It's about creating new possibilities, so it seemed fitting to create a new word. It's not about leaving your job. It's about finding yourself. It's about what happens when you're ready to liberate your soul from the clutches of your ego. I realized along the way that the essence of Soulbbatical is not a departure from the real world. It's a way of being in the real world. It's a way of creating the life you really want versus settling for what you think you should have. It's about living and leading from a place of authenticity and courage. It's about stepping into your power and leaning into your purpose in order to unleash your wildest potential. It's about becoming chief soul officer of your own life and accepting responsibility for nurturing both yourself and your soul. It's about accumulating self-worth, not suffering for the sake of net worth, and profoundly understanding that these don't have to be mutually exclusive after all. I'll leave it there.
Woo!
Well done.
Manifesto.
Yeah, it
All
goes
right.
on, but I think that was good for our purposes.
That was great for our purposes. Let's take it to Laura, and Laura's going to help curate some of the questions that have come in and bring those questions in. And by the way, Shelley, just so you know, there's a handful of people who have written in the chat, oh my God, this is the best happy hour ever of the 8.
Oh,
So good job, girlfriend.
thank you guys.
And show your shirt. So
Oh
everybody.
yeah, I was just thinking that too. This is my favorite Harley shirt, you guys. Freedom isn't quiet. I don't know why it's not on camera, but you know,
It's
they
okay.
need a lift.
Yeah,
That's a whole other happy hour. It's a whole other. No, this is my favorite, and I just feel like it's really appropriate for the times that we're living in right now. And you guys, for us, like when I say authenticity is the truest form of rebellion, it's like we can't be quiet about that either. So, yeah, okay. So questions.
So thank you. Anne-Marie is like feeding me all these questions coming through the chat. One from Karen Cinzio. Top 3 signs that you need a Soulbbatical.
Oh, that's a good one. Mm-hmm. So I would say, number 1, that feeling of emptiness, like I described, right? It's like, everyone's like, you have the coolest life. And you're like, but I'm not feeling it, right? Like I call it being success empty versus success full. So my whole thing is like, let's rewrite the script of success to be success plus fulfillment, which I spent most of my life thinking were mutually exclusive. So I think that emptiness, the second thing I would say is if you catch yourself, so language matters. If you catch yourself saying should a lot, ask yourself why. Why should I? So I have a lot of, in fact, the title of or subtitle of the book I pitched had something to do with shoulding all over yourself. Simon and Schuster didn't go for it. I don't know why. So, but that idea, like it plays a very central role in the story I tell, because I talk about the 3 main shoulds in my life and how they were basically undoing me and causing a lot of physical distress and a lot of harm, because it was me basically saying I need to live on someone else's terms instead of on my own. So catch yourself there and question. And the third thing I would say is watch your energy. So the thing that I realize now is I'm really clear on what things fuel my energy and what things drain my energy, and ensuring that I'm spending more time on the things that are fueling than the things that are draining. So when we feel really exhausted, it's not always because we're tired. A lot of the times it's because we are so totally and completely doing the things that suck the life out of us. And we need to prune those things. So those would be my 3.
Good. Those are super good. And I know what you mean by that energy drain. It's even in a conversation with someone who just depletes you. And after 15 minutes, you feel like you were with them for 5 hours.
Oh, 100%. I've done more pruning of humans and activities in my life than I can even say. And it's the reason I can show up like this, because I only want things that fuel me. That's like when I connected with Chip, I was like, oh, more Chip, please, more Chip, please. Like, that's what I want. I want more MEA. I want more Chip. Now I want more David. Now I want more Laura. Like, I love you guys. Like, that's the stuff. This is the stuff that lights my soul on fire. And I am on a mission to get more of that into my life. And I would invite everybody else to do the same.
Yeah, this group definitely brings that. That's for sure.
Yeah. Oh, where can you get your book? My book is everywhere, you guys. This is what it looks like, by the way. Soulbbatical. It's bright orange. So this wasn't in Chip's introduction. My favorite color is orange. Everything, you'll see my house behind me, like everything's orange. So it's called Soulbbatical, A Corporate Rebel's Guide to Finding Your Best Life. You can literally, it's on Amazon. It's at your favorite bookstore. Support your indie bookstores if you can. Support Black-owned bookstores, please. But yeah.
Here's a question from Bonnie Sachs. I think a big analogy to Soulbbatical is venturing into retirement and identity attached to a job or career. So shouldn't that be the first thing you shed?
Yeah, I think, yes. I think there is a parallel there. So it's similar to the story I told, you know, New Zealand was kind of the pinnacle point of that. But yeah, okay, so here's funny. This is my version of that. The reason I gave myself the title Chief Soul Officer is because I was so title sensitive that I couldn't imagine when people were like, well, what are you going to do? Like, you've been at the top of the mountain, you've been the CMO of Harley Davidson, like, where are you going to go next? And I was having a hard time describing to people, all of whom thought I was batshit crazy because I was leaving this job, right? So I'm like, I'm going to create a fucking title. Like, I'm going to create a title and I'm going to give myself a title. So I created Chief Soul Officer and this thing Soulbbatical so that I could literally give myself like a LinkedIn description. And now I view those things very differently. But the first thing I had to do was, yeah, I had to like anchor my identity in something closer to myself. And I knew if I anchored it to soul, which is my truth and my essence, that I would be starting to shed all the rest of that stuff. So hopefully that in a roundabout way answers the question. I think it's absolutely, and get real clear on your values. That's the other piece. It was a big part of my transition, like this, Chip, what do you call it? The liminal space, liminality? Yeah.
Liminality,
right. So a big piece for me in like this liminality was really, really getting clear on my top 2 to 3 values. So I would give anybody that guidance as well at any point in life. Really get clear, because that is the lens through which you make all decisions. And so here's the funny thing. When I got clear on my values, I realized in this order: freedom, authenticity, and courage. And I was like, freedom. Okay, well, I kind of get why I was working for the Harley brand, because in essence, Harley is selling emotional freedom, right? That's what you're selling when you get on a motorcycle. At the same time, being in the corporate world is anything but freedom. So like my soul was like suffocating. So just getting that clear in my mind, and now creating a life that's all about freedom, authenticity, and courage has been part of my liberation.
So beautiful. So let's see. Have you had a mentor or a guide on this journey?
Oh, bless you, whoever just sneezed. Oh, it's such a good question. I honestly struggled with this. I'll tell you what I did. I feel like I have more recently started to meet people like you guys, people like Chip and David, people who are on the kind of path that I'm on. Early on, I didn't, and that's why I struggled, and that's why I wanted to write a book that I knew would help others, because it's hard to feel alone. One of the first things I did after I went on this initial journey, which was a very solo, you know, kind of my own Joseph Campbell heroes or heroines journey, when I got clear that coaching was going to be a part of this, and it was all about growth and personal development, and I wanted to keep pushing in the soul liberation space, and I got clear on this purpose and mission to liberate 1 billion souls, I knew I had to join a community that scared the shit out of me. And so I joined a community based out of LA, out of Santa Monica, a coach by the name of Rich Litvin. He runs a community called 4PC. He calls it the top 4%, I don't know what he says, extraordinary leaders and coaches. And I was like, I'm going to go get involved in Rich's community, and I'm going to go participate in it. And then I'm going to apply for it. And then I'm going to be in it, because I know if I'm in that and I set that intention, those people are going to challenge me and inspire me on this journey in a way that I never had before. And I knew I couldn't rely on my old network, kind of my business network, to do that. And so that's one of the things I did early on in the journey, right as I was opening the doors to my business, so that I knew I would be learning from the best and I would be pushed so far outside of my comfort zone. And that's exactly what happened. And to this day, I'm still in 4PC.
Wow. Wow. A question from Jonathan Atwood. So precisely, what is your purpose? This liberating 1 billion souls. Like, how are you going to do that?
Not by myself, which is why I love having these kinds of conversations, because, you know, I knew from the very beginning that I couldn't do this on my own. And it's really funny, okay, there's another little paragraph that I have to read you guys, because I realized that I wanted this to be a legacy, in the sense that I want Soulbbatical to outlive me. And I want this to be a way that more of us live. And I think about the measure of my success in terms of redefining ROI. So I did a presentation for about 150 people about a month or month and a half ago. And a woman said to me, "Oh my God, Shelley, you've just redefined ROI. It no longer means return on investment. It now means ripples of impact." And I was like, I cried, I had goosebumps, and I realized she's right. And I'm sharing that with everyone, because that's the answer. The answer is, I could never do this on my own. I'm not that arrogant or egotistical or whatever. This is just what I want for the world. This is what I want for humanity. And I want all of us to do this together. So I view myself as one of those ripples, and I'm out in front, like starting those ripples. And I want all of us to be contributing to that. And there's this paragraph I have to read you guys. Do we have time for a quick paragraph?
Yeah.
Okay. This was played back to me last week on LinkedIn. It is a very strange thing to wake up one morning and see that you're tagged and all these people are commenting on something that I was like, I don't even know this. Well, oh yeah, I know that person, but who are all these people? And I realized that a friend of a friend who was reading my book captured this statement. And this to me is the ripples of impact that I'm talking about. And I didn't even remember that I wrote this. And I can't believe that I wrote it in 2019 and we're reading it right now with everything going on in the world. So let me quickly read this to you. So I say, remember the mission I declared way back in the introduction? I said I wanted to liberate 1 billion souls. It's a massive number, but not an impossible one to reach if we do this together. I want Soulbbatical to live well beyond me and my time on this planet. I believe it's the next phase of our evolution as a culture. More people desiring to live in alignment with their souls and creating lives and businesses rooted in meaning and fulfillment. You can already feel and see it in the outbursts of civil activism and peaceful protests, in the beautiful celebrations of self-identity and expression, and in the standing up for or kneeling down for our truths and values. living proof that authenticity is the truest form of rebellion. So that's my mission, my purpose, and the ripples of impact that I hope to have in the world.
How many of you who are listening, watching right now think that this is the next Brene Brown that we're talking to right here?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
You know how much I love her, that nobody could pay me a higher compliment.
There you go. You deserve it. I'm going to let Laura ask one last question, and then I'm going to talk about your nonprofit that we're going to help people know about, and then we're going to wrap up. Unfortunately, it all happened so quickly. Laura.
It does.
We need 3 more hours, just like you said, Chip.
David Kleiman, what was the most unexpected outcome after you shed corporate Shelley and became soulful Shelley?
Oh, that's a good question. Man, that's real. I've never been asked that question before.
Thank you, David Kleiman.
You had better dreams.
Oh, I thought you were going to say I had better sex.
I did not intend to put you on the spot.
No. Oh my gosh. I absolutely love tough questions. No, please don't apologize. The most unexpected is, to be honest, it goes back to something I said before. I think it's the fact that everything started to happen in that moment. It's like, as soon as I started to believe in myself and the truth of me and my own inherent worth and value as soulful Shelley, and I started living into this purpose, that's when everything in my life started opening up. There's a reason why 4 years later, I am on this mission doing this thing, and it would be my dream in life to become the next Brene Brown, the Shelley Paxton, right? Because I can never be Brene, I just want to be Shelley. But that's when everything happened, and I would never have believed that. I really believed that I had to wear those masks and that armor, and I was supposed to do these other things. And now I know that your truth liberates your power.
Beautiful.
Put that in gold.
Yes.
You guys, I'm gonna start making merchandise with all this stuff. Seriously, I just
bumper stickers, of course. Tell us about the Life is Priceless Foundation, because 10% of the proceeds of your book are going to them. And Laura or Anne-Marie will actually put the link in the chat so people can actually donate to them if they'd like.
Oh, I'm so grateful. Yeah, thank you. So I referenced earlier in the conversation that, my book talks about my own mental health journey. It's something really, really important to me. And 9 years ago, almost to the month, so in October 9 years ago, I lost a very, very, very dear friend to suicide. His name was David Price, and young, successful guy, 31 years old, soul brother of mine. And it was 3 years after my own attempted suicide. And so it is, let's just say that it's a cause, depression, the research and treatment of depression, suicide prevention. I'm one of the lucky ones who survived, and I'm so glad that I am, because I'm on this mission today. But in David's honor, his brother Tim Price set up the Life is Priceless Foundation. So they support research and treatment of depression, suicide prevention, they support families, and it's a really beautiful cause. And so, yeah, it's because I talk about it, I believe in it. And one of the things I say in the book is, I think I only told 5 people outside of my family that I tried to take my own life. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed to talk about it. And I very explicitly put it in the book because I want to shine a light on it. I'm no longer ashamed of it. I want to talk about it, and I want to get it out into the world. So it's something I'm super passionate about. Yeah, any support I'd be super grateful for.
We love you.
I love you guys too.
Oh my God. So thumbs up from our
I can't wait to see you in Baja and create a Soulbbatical program with you, Chip.
Yes, I think so. So Shelley's going to come. What I love about it is Shelley's going to come as a student, and then she'll come back as faculty, and that is how we all are in life. We are both a mentor and an intern at the same time. We are a mentern. All right, David, I'm going to wrap by telling who's coming next. Is that okay? Anything else you want to say, David? Oh, you're actually
David, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
I missed out on Sturgis, but another day.
Oh, I know. There's so much more.
That's a good excuse to talk again. Let's do it.
I know. Let's do it. And David, by the way, so just everybody knows, David is co-leading with me the first week of January at MEA, January 3rd through the 10th. If you're interested, go to the MEA website. We will be back 2 weeks from today, August 6th, Thursday, August 6th. Our next guest, again, we don't tell you the name, we just give you a little hint, is a behavioral scientist at Stanford University. He is not the CMO of Stanford. He's created an equation about motivation, ability, and a prompt. But his big deal right now is he authored a book that's gone wild called Tiny Habits, the Small Changes That Change Everything. I won't tell you his name. I'll just tell you he's got a lot to share. And if you have habits that you want to both get rid of or incorporate in your life, 2 weeks from today, we'll work on your habits. Thanks, everybody. Thank you to David, to Shelley, to Laura, Anne-Marie, everybody. We love you. It's a complicated time, and we're doing our best to just be there to shine the light on happiness in our own way.
Great show.
Any last thoughts?
Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you.
Thank you.